Hello, baddies. On this week's episode of Called to Be Bad, I talk with the Theology Queen, Marge Erin Johnson, who is a minister, entrepreneur, and drag queen. You can read her full bio and see all of her socials in the podcast/YouTube description below. In this episode, Marge unravels what is drag church, how/why she started drag during seminary, how drag can be spiritually healing, and why she doesn't need to reconcile drag with her faith and why you don't either. I know I say every single week that I am excited for you to experience this new episode, but this is probably one of the episodes that I am most excited for you to hear/watch. If you do watch this episode, you'll get to see Marge in full drag, so I think it's worth it. She looks amazing. Also, for those of you who are patrons on Patreon, I will upload a special extra clip of Marge giving us a brow tutorial. So if for no other reason than just to see this clip, go on Patreon, sign up, and then you'll get to watch it and be part of the Patreon community. This is a long episode, so I watched it back and I just didn't want to cut a single word. So get cozy, get your coffee, make a delicious meal, do your laundry or whatever it is you do while listening to this podcast, and I hope you enjoy.
I really do emphasize like the spiritual healing aspect of doing drag church. And to me, like the value is in making sure people know that they are loved and that they are created exactly as they're meant to be.
Okay. 1, 2, ready, go.
Welcome to the Called to Be Bad podcast. My name is Mariah Martin, and I feel called to be bad. It turns out I'm not the only one. Join us as we dig into all things bad, scandalous, deviant, you know, the stuff that makes good church folks squirm in the sanctuary. Why? Well, because sometimes the scandalous is spiritual, deviant is divine, and bad is beautiful. Say yes to the call, and let's see what holy trouble we get into today. Hi, Marge.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Welcome to Called to Be Bad. So, welcome, Marge. I'm so excited to talk drag and church with you today.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into that, I am curious what you are drinking.
Okay, so I've already started, but
Mm-hmm.
I have a very luxurious iced coffee from Dunkin' Donuts with 4 pumpkin swirls and 6 creams.
Wow, that's amazing.
Delicious.
I have not tried that. I'll have to go get the Marge. Can I have the Marge, please? And today I have a little rooster mug. I don't have, someone send me a drag mug, please. I don't have one. So I just picked a little rooster with his little pretty tail. And I am drinking ginger tea. So not that exciting, but just like a little bit spicy as far as teas go. So that's what I have. Yeah, so we're talking about drag church, and we often, well, always start with definitions. And so I think there's 2 things that we need to define. Like, what is drag? And then what is drag church? What does it mean to be yeah, anyways, you get the idea. So, yeah.
Well, I would say it's kind of difficult to define drag because drag is many things, right? So, like, right off the bat. But, to go with Judith Butler's definition from the 1990s, the definition was something like a parody and simulation of the performance of gender, which, that resonates with me and my form of drag. And I would also say that drag is a liberating performance art that is specific but like not limited to the queer community and the queer and trans community, and it's a celebration. I don't know, drag just feels like very much like a celebration to me, And I would also say that in, today's sort of like cultural understanding of drag, I think a lot of people think that drag is what you do and your gender is what you are. And for me, drag is very much who I am as well. And it's something that is like tied to my gender identity and is also a way for me to experience gender euphoria, right?
Mm.
To feel like more like myself. So there's this really great quote. Sorry, am I going on too long?
No, please. Please. This is why I brought you on. Please go.
Yeah. So I started doing drag at Union Theological Seminary, and one of the deans, her name is Sue Pak. We invited her to go to one of the chapel services and like dress up in drag and like to also do like an opening welcome and blessing. And she had this really great quote, which I'm assuming that she came up with herself, which was something like, drag is breaking through the veil and letting our buried parts roam free. I really love that. It gives me chills.
Yeah.
Because it's so true. Like, I feel like queerness has been like culturally in the United States, which is where I'm from, buried, right? And it's sort of like this reclaiming of like the hidden parts of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or it is. I would say it is.
Yeah.
At least for me. And so there are drag queens, which is what I am. There are drag kings, there are drag clowns, there are drag things. And, they're all valid. They're all valid. And I just want to be like really careful to say, or to like not to give the impression that like being a drag queen is like the highest form of drag, because it is not.
Okay.
One form of drag that gets a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And so drag church is when
Wait, before you go, sorry, real fast. I have a question. What is the drag thing? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I would probably, I'm probably like not the best person to give a definition because like I'm not a drag thing, but I would assume that someone who like is a drag thing is someone who like does drag in a way that is not necessarily like confined by gender, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Not to say that like they can't perform gender, but that it seems like less restricted to me, right?
Yeah.
Because for me as a drag queen, like I don't perform as like a masculine presenting drag king, at least not yet.
Not yet. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that my first guess would be that like a drag thing would be playing with kind of like gender nonconformity or gender or like non-binary like worlds. Would that be accurate?
Yeah,
or is it like non-human drag?
Oh, I mean, I don't know.
Okay. We'll have to do some research. I'm gonna take notes. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. What is drag church then?
Okay, so drag church is this wonderful thing that I do as what I have recently learned is called a pastorpreneur.
Ooh, pastorpreneur. All right.
I mean, like with the decline of the church and everything like that. A lot of clergy, at least in my denomination, which is the United Church of Christ, we are bivocational. And it's because like full-time jobs in churches like are becoming less and less common, right? Like there are so many more churches that are hiring for 3/4 time pastor or half-time pastor, or like some churches are even doing like quarter-time pastor.
I'm a third-time pastor, so yeah. Yeah.
I used to be too. I would work around 30 hours a week, which was like great, and then I had time to do like other things. And so like that that actually like works for me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it works for you.
Yeah. Well, it allows me to do this podcast, so yeah.
Yeah. Oh, work. So yeah, drag church is like exactly what it sounds like, right? It is like doing church in drag. And I mean, I'm not the only person who does drag church. There are a lot of spiritual drag artists that have come before me and are yet to come.
Mm.
And so I'll just talk about like what drag church is for me. And it's just dressing up, dressing up in drag and doing church.
Mm-hmm.
In a nutshell, right? Like there are
Yeah.
many things that go along with that and like many things that drag church does.
So is drag church simply like church and yet the pastor or do people come dressed in drag?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it mainly like whoever is speaking is in drag?
Yeah, so both.
Both.
When I have done drag church, there are people who have shown up in drag. And there are also people who show up like wearing something like maybe like that they wouldn't normally wear to church, like a sequin dress or something like that. And like that's great because then you get to like feel your fabulosity too, And it's something, and to like quote the Church of Fabulosity, because like that's their theology and what they're about, and I love them.
Wait, you said it's the Church of Fabulosity? Is that what you said?
Yeah, there's a church, a new church that seems to be like up and coming, I would say, called the Church of Fabulosity. Their logo is a flamingo.
That's so great.
And they have a podcast too. So like I listen to the episodes, and like what they're about is like very much what I'm about too. So I think they're fantastic. And they call it feeling your fabulosity. And so, when I get in drag, I'm feeling my fabulosity.
Yeah.
When someone shows up wearing a sequin gown to church, they're feeling their fabulosity, or someone who's wearing a boa, or someone who's wearing heels, or, whatever. Feeling your fabulosity. And so I like to say and, assert that drag church is not something that like I'm doing by myself. Right? It's something that we do together as a community, right? And so when you walk into a well-organized drag church service, I would hope that there is a table when you first walk in that says like wear some beads, like, and have these like accessories available, right? Some hats, some colorful boas, or like anything, just so that like you can feel like you're participating too, and you are participating, right? And so, yeah.
Okay, one sec. I realized, what am I doing? I have a boa over here. I need to take your cue and step into my fabulosity as well.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Is that better? That's better.
It is.
Unless it makes me itch, then I might have to ditch the boa. Okay, so you're saying that, like, hopefully there would be a table and people could come in and, like, get a boa or beads or something, and that's a way for them to participate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you consider, like, do you, like, worship lead and or preach, or do you do one or the other, or how do you lead up front, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so I do both.
Okay.
Typically, if someone invites me to do a drag church service, I will also be the person to preach.
Okay.
But like not always, It really just depends on what the congregation wants to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you consider, like, when you're up front, do you consider that a performance?
Absolutely.
Okay.
To me, it just like makes so much sense, right? Like you're up there and you're doing something.
You're up there, you're doing something, hence performance. Because I feel like a lot, like I'm from the Anabaptist Mennonite tradition, which like one of the, for better or worse, like humility has traditionally been like a big thing. And so I think that there's this emphasis in not, like, I think some pastors would be like, oh no, it's not a performance, like it's not about me, it's about God, it's about worship, And Yeah, what do you think about that?
I mean, it is about God too. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I don't think that those things are mutually exclusive.
Yeah. 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 It kind of drives me nuts because for me, like you were saying, like when people are stepping into their light, their euphoria, you know, their fabulosity, you're telling me like that is not God, divine, creator, whatever your name for God is, like shining through. Like that,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, I heard this quote that was saying like the opposite of depression is not being happy. Like, yeah, the opposite of depression is not being happy. The opposite of depression is self-expression. Is the ability to express who you are. You know, the kind of, what did you call it? Like the dark, the hidden parts of yourself
Yeah,
in drag.
letting the buried parts of yourself like
Buried.
it was also for a service like a Dragoween service, so it kind of has
Oh.
like that imagery, right? Like letting the
Ooh.
buried parts of yourself, come to the surface and roam free.
Which
Uh,
like resurrection language, like it's right
mhm,
there. Yeah.
mhm,
Okay, that's really neat. Um yeah. Okay. So we've learned what drag is, or one definition. And I often say like it doesn't have to be perfect dictionary definition, just like how you use the term
mhm.
drag. And we've learned what a drag church is. Oh, my other question was when you preach or lead a drag service, um is it like, is there special emphasis on gender or sexuality? Like is there kind of that tilt to it, or is it just like, all right, John 3:16, you know, like you're just kind of traditional church service? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So when I organized the drag church service and like when I started doing this at Union Theological Seminary, I worked with my partner in crime, Chad Manley, who's a drag king and also an Episcopal priest.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought that it would be a good idea to follow like a traditional Protestant worship service because it provides a sense of grounding for people, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we're not doing church completely differently today. We're still following the regular like order of worship, right?
Yeah.
But we're doing it in this very fabulous and life-giving and freeing way that yes, like does incorporate like a gender aspect and like a queer aspect and also like queer theology and like queer biblical interpretation. Those are all really important elements to how I do drag church, but it's not like you go to church and it's like completely differently that day.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It's
kind of love that. That like kind of the dichotomy of the groundedness of like the liturgy with the freedom of the
mhm,
fabulosity, for lack of a better term. That's
mhm.
nice. What does drag have to do with gender and or sexuality, if it has anything to do with those?
Yeah, I mean it's an art form that like belongs to the queer community, right? I mean like not
Mm-hmm.
exclusively, right? Like as I said before, but like that's like what it means to be like part of the LGBTQIA plus community, right? That you have
Mm-hmm.
like sort of like marginalized sexual orientation or gender identity or expression, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
So,
No, that, yeah, that makes sense.
and I would also say like, especially for like feminine people, and maybe like I don't know, I hate to use the term AMAB as like an assigned male at birth person, but like I was like shamed as a kid for being feminine, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a way for me to reclaim that part of myself and to do it in a very extravagant and unapologetic way, and so in that way it's also very spiritually healing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's it's not just like me you know prancing around and being like I'm spiritually healing myself. Like it also facilitates that healing process for other people as well.
Oh yeah.
For me to show up as myself, really, because I feel like there's also that authenticity piece that when it comes to drag, that you sort of, or you do become like more of who you are. You sort of like shine more brightly. Like there are these parts of yourself that again have been buried and are like coming out in this way. And that gives people permission to do the same thing, no matter who they are, right? And because it's not like, straight people have that problem too. And so like one framing thing that I'm like really careful to like be sure to say is that like drag church is freeing, liberating, and healing for the queer and trans community and for straight people too.
The straight people just have to be included. They're just like, oh, but what about me? Yeah. No, but I hear it. Like it drag church is for everyone and gives everyone permission to kind of to let that inner joy, light, celebration shine.
Yeah.
I guess what I was kind of getting at with the question of like what does it have to do with gender, it is kind of to parse apart like gender and sexuality are different things. So like would being in drag, would that say anything about your sexuality, or is it just like these are different things?
I mean, not necessarily.
Okay.
Like, I guess it can, right? Like, I don't know. I think a lot of people assume that, you see a drag queen and, for so many people, a drag queen is a man dressing up as a woman. And that's really not necessarily true because anyone could do drag, And, like, let's not also forget that, like, trans women also do drag and are women.
Yeah.
you know? And so, yeah. I mean, I guess it could be, like, I would say, like, an expression of queerness and, like, an expression of sexuality. And for me, like, it's very much tied to my gender. It's less tied to my sexuality. And I think a lot of people are surprised when I share that I'm a demisexual person.
Can you explain what that is real fast for?
Yeah, so it's asexual ness being a spectrum. I'm sort of like in the gray area that I don't really experience sexual attraction unless I have some sort of existing relationship and like emotional bond with that person. And that's something new for me. It's like something that I've been exploring more. So like I don't necessarily like have all of like the best terminology or like the best understanding. But like I have found that like a lot of people sexualize me as a drag queen, and I'm just like, no, like mind your business. Just because I'm gorgeous doesn't mean I'm available,
Yes, and I think that is exactly what I was trying to flesh out. Because I see in this kind of pushback or like anti-trans legislation this exaggerated sexualization of drag or in it, and that doesn't sit right with me. That's like they're like, oh, why does it have to be so in your face? I'm like, what is in your face? Like what? Like the boa? Like you know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't have this direct correlation to sexuality. Drag queens are not trying to make your children gay. Is that, can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, drag is an invitation to be fully who you are, no matter
exactly
who that is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So tell me more about your story. About you said you started doing drag in seminary. Yeah. What was that like, and what kind of gave you that push to explore drag?
Yeah. So it was actually during COVID. I lived in New York City when COVID hit New York City. And so it was a lot of scrambling, a lot of figuring out like where I'm going to live and how I'm going to stay safe and how I'm going to get my material needs met. And what I ended up doing was I moved I was living on a dorm floor on campus, and a friend of mine had a studio apartment and she was fleeing the city. So she said, I already paid my rent for the rest of the semester. And I think for the following year, or was it? Or no, it was March. So I moved in there and I stayed during the summer as well. But I found myself in this space of, as a non-binary person, being like, okay, well, I want to lean more into expressing who I am and like the more feminine aspects of myself. And the way I chose to do that was through makeup. And so, I went on Amazon, an unethical source, and I wasn't going to go to a drugstore or anything like that to go get makeup during COVID. Like, no. I mean, if you got to, but I wasn't going to do that. So I spent $200 on Amazon and I got the cheapest makeup products that I could find to do a full face. And I was watching Nikki tutorials on YouTube, and I was following like everything that she was doing. And that was really great. That was really great. And I did this like really fantastic sermon called The Theology of Makeup.
Ooh. Do you have
Yeah.
it filmed or written out? Can you send it to me?
Yeah, it is filmed. It's online.
Okay. I'll have to link it. Yeah.
Mhm. It was the Pride Sunday sermon at Fort Washington Collegiate Church during COVID when we were all still in our homes. And so it was a sermon, but it was also a makeup tutorial of like how to do rainbow eyeshadow. So it was really fantastic. And I would say like, I don't know, like not to toot my own horn, but like groundbreaking for some people.
Please. Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure.
And so then I was like, I have always loved drag, and I think I would like to try to do drag. I had loved drag since I saw Drag Race on TV for the first time. And I was like, you know what? I think it's time. And so I just like tried doing drag makeup, and I was like, oh, I'm into this. This is good for me. And I also had a background in theater. I was a theater major for like 2 years. But I didn't graduate with a theater degree. I actually ended up majoring in anthropology. But I did take a theatrical makeup class while I was in grad. So I had that foundational knowledge. And I think a lot of people were surprised when I was just like really good at doing makeup, like just like immediately. And I was like, listen, like I have this foundation, and I'm also an acrylic painter. So it's really not that different. It's just powder.
I love
paint.
I love the accidental pun of I have this foundation of makeup.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you knew already how to do the makeup basics and acrylic painting, and yeah. Were you gonna say more after that?
I just went for it, take a risk, do what you want to do. I feel like a lot of people during COVID, like during lockdown especially, it was a time of self-discovery for like nearly everyone, if not everyone. And, what are the things that you found? Like, what are your buried parts that like came up to the surface and decided to roam free, And so for me, it was drag. For me, it was an expression of my gender, right? And that still shapes me today. Here I am. Here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. Yeah. And so how did that kind of self-expression, that kind of self-knowledge, how did that interact with your faith? 'Cause that's a big question. I say we don't take it easy on people on the Call to Be Bad podcast, so sorry.
Well, if you're called to be bad, you gotta, I feel like you have some sort of premise, right? So like, let's just get into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
What was the question again? Oh, dragon and like religion.
Dragon faith. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, like, I'm a Christian person. I am a Protestant. I grew up in the Congregational Church in New England. I have always been part of the United Church of Christ, which is a sometimes progressive Christian denomination.
Mm.
And now I'm living more into the progressive side. I'm someone who's been harmed by the church. I'm someone who has been harmed by the church that people would not expect would be harming people. And I really just want to name that because a lot of people think the United Church of Christ is like all like social justice, social gospel, and all this, that, and the other thing. And like, yes, that is true. And there are, I want to say there are 4,800 UCC churches in the United States, and only about half of them are open and affirming. And so let us recognize that, and let us also recognize the possibility for harm. Because a lot of people are harmed by the church, and a lot of people are harmed in the United Church of Christ. And there's also a lot of good that can come out of the United Church of Christ, and a lot of good that does come out of it. So there's that. Now, as far as like my own personal faith journey, I'm on a mission to be the queer elder that I never had. Like, I grew up in church, and actually I did have a queer elder, and I didn't really know it at the time. And I didn't really know that I was queer either. I just knew I was different, you know? And I feel like that's a common experience for queer people. And I could sense that something was different about her as well. I wasn't fully aware of like what was going on, but it was just sort of like, I feel like she gets me. Like, I feel like she gets me in a way that like the other adults in my life just don't. And like, come to find out, like when I found out, you know, I grew up and I found out that she was a lesbian, and I was just like, oh, no wonder
It all
why
makes sense now. Yeah.
And she was my youth minister. And she's fantastic. I sent her a Christmas card, and we exchange comments on Facebook occasionally.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And so I really do emphasize like the spiritual healing aspect of doing drag church, because like that's really like what it's all about. And like we can say other things too, like we could say how it's like disruptive, and like it disrupts our norms, and like makes us like rethink what's like normal, and like this, that, and the other thing. We could do all of that. And to me, like the value is in making sure people know that they are loved and that they are created exactly as they're meant to be. Right? And drag church is the way to do that in the most like, as far as I know, the most extravagant way. Right? And we can do church queerly without doing drag, right? And so like the church that I worked at, Fort Washington Collegiate, had like a Pride Sunday service in June, right? And then they would go out to the Pride Parade, and it was like this great celebration. And I was just, you know, as a minister who was working there at the time, I was like, we can take this further. We can take this further. So there's this really great book called The Real Good Church by Molly Finney Baskett. How Our Church Came Back from the Dead, and Yours Can Too. So here we go with the resurrection theme, right?
Yeah.
And the author, Molly Finney Baskett, who wrote this book and was the pastor of First Church Somerville, which is the church that the book is about, they had a drag gospel fest. And they did it, I think, every year. They had a member of their church who is a drag queen do the liturgy, and then I think also one of their ministers would get in drag too, and then they would like also have a talent show. Like they went all out. Like in some ways they went all out, more all out than I do.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know, we could bring that here. Like we could do that. And I read that book before I went to seminary, and you know, I went to seminary with the idea that like I would love to do that someday. Like I would love to be the minister or the pastor that like organizes like a drag church service for a congregation. But I never thought that I would be the drag queen.
You're like,
I,
oh wait, me?
me,
What?
me, God, really? Oh, are you sure? Are
Sure.
you going through a tunnel when you called me God? I'm not sure.
Yes.
Um, and so doing dragon worship, I think is quite profound because we can have different ways of like being an affirming church, like being an open, like let's not even talk about the open and not affirming churches. Okay, let's just talk about the churches that are open and affirming for now. How you lean into being affirming is very often on the periphery of the church community. And so what I mean by that is you'll have an educational event or you'll have some sort of panel and it will be on a Wednesday night. Or it'll be Sunday after church when everyone is like eating and ready to leave. What if we did this in worship?
Mm-hmm.
Because I come from the understanding that worship, Sunday morning worship is the heart and the soul of the community. It is the thing that brings everyone together. And until we queer worship, we cannot queer the church. Right? If we're isolating queerness to the Wednesday night Bible study, you still have more work to do.
Yeah.
And also the question of whose voice is being heard. And so I take this very, like, I am a drag queen, but I do take this seriously in terms of the privilege to be able to speak to a group of people and have their attention for like maybe 20 minutes on a Sunday morning, right? That's a lot of pressure. But it's also very important who you're listening to. We did a survey and we found that most people come to worship to hear the message or the sermon. It's not true for everyone, but in our church, that was the case. And so if we want to queer the heart and soul of a church, it's not just showing up on Sunday. It's not just like, oh, we're doing this like other event here, or oh, you're the drag queen, but you're the liturgist. Right? It's a whole other experience for the drag queen to be preaching. Right? And so that is what I do. And so it's very challenging for people, and I know that. And it's also very liberating for others. Right? It can be challenging and liberating. Things can be multiple things at once. I'm going to take a pause there because I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I love that. I love the challenge to kind of take it to the center, bring it to the heart of worship, not just like because that's like your whole point is like it doesn't have to be relegated to the side, can our queerness be front and center in a worship space, especially in traditions where like the priest is like, oh, what's the language, like just like the representative of God. I come from a low church tradition, so I don't remember what it is, but like to have someone in drag, to have a drag queen, saying the words of institution, preaching the word of God, like that is different. That is different than just like, oh, let's watch this video about drag and go home.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
What has been some responses of folks in your congregation, outside your congregation, to you, wearing a collar? Can you just show it off for a second? It's so great.
I bedazzled it myself.
Bedazzled. I love it. Yeah, to you in drag, to you preaching in drag church, what have been some responses?
Yeah, I mean, people have cried. Like tears of healing and joy. And that's just like such a weird thing to be in the spot, like, oh, I'm like doing this thing and oh, I'm making people cry. Um, and that feels good,
Yes.
because
I
it's
was
good
gonna say,
good
yeah,
tears.
it's good. It's healing tears. Yeah.
Yes.
I take it as a huge compliment if people cry during
Yes,
my sermons. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's sometimes a surprise because I don't know, like having gone to like a few different communities, um, like the way in which the church has harmed people, it's kind of like this thing where like you kind of sweep it under the rug, but it's still there. And then it comes out and it comes out as tears, right?
Mhm.
Um, because when you're healing, when you're sweeping things under the rug, for some people the there's so much under there that it's a lump and then people are tripping over the lump.
Mm. Yeah.
Someone said that to me recently. I thought it was hilarious, but
I mean, yeah, it's right there in my brain. It makes sense. Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
drag church is a way to like to reckon with that and to say that to say in a way that like we're not actually saying it. We're not saying like you're healed or anything, but it's what happens, right? Um, and it's not just like people who have been harmed because they're queer. It's people who have been harmed by the church because let's say they got divorced and they were asked to leave the church, you
Mm.
know? And so when I come in or when a drag queen comes in to church, it shows how awful all of those rules have been, and it demonstrates an alternative that's life-giving and is spirit-filled to say all of those experiences that you had, those like can I swear on this?
Mm-hmm.
Those
Go be
shitty
dad.
okay,
Yeah.
oh hell yeah. Shitty experiences that you had are wrong.
Mm.
That should not have happened to you. Um and so when I see straight people cry, I'm just like, damn.
See, that's what my mug. I need a mug that says like straight people tears.
I saw this thing on Etsy and it was like a cup like this and it said bigot tears. I thought it was hilarious.
So that's your marker. You know you're doing your job when straight people start crying. Yeah.
In a good way. Yeah.
In a good
I don't
way.
think I've made straight people cry in the ways that they're horrified, right? Because some people are horrified. I mean, the right-wing media has covered me and it's just sort of like, y'all don't have a life, honestly. I think that's really just what it comes down to. I don't really have an immense reach, I have like 4,000 people who follow me on Instagram. And people are making videos about me that have like tens of thousands of views. And I'm just like, y'all are so like annoying and obnoxious. And like of all the things you could be doing, you're coming after this like drag queen who went and preached to 50 people on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's like the biggest abomination to them. And like that's annoying. And so another way that people react is that they say that it's challenging. Okay. And um and so the question is, what do you do with that challenge? Um I personally I love to be challenged in church because it doesn't happen that often anymore. But I love it when it happens. I love when people post things on social media that challenge me and make me go, oh no, I disagree. And then I go back to it later and I'm just like, no, I do agree, actually. I do agree.
Mm.
You're right. Because that's how we grow. That's how we grow spiritually, that's how we grow intellectually. That's how we grow in ways so that we understand how to better be in community with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hear, oh, it's like challenging, my question is, what are you doing with that? Like, are you doing the same thing that I do? or that what other people do when they're challenged, which is to reflect, right, and to sit with it. And I don't think everyone does. I think a number of people are challenged and they have difficulty dealing with that challenge. Um, but I think some people are challenged by it, and I hate to say they're better for it, but like they kind of are.
Yeah, it's if that challenge shows up, that's an invitation to like interrogate. Like, okay, what is the resistance here? Why is this? Why is my body reacting to this? And like,
Mm-hmm.
can you sit in it? And can you, embrace that challenge? Because like you're saying, like when you were like, so like that, it's a you problem. Like if the challenge is coming up, that and that's good because that means you have something to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're saying like this is challenging as a dismissal, as in like this is
Right.
challenging, so I'm not going to do anything with it, that is a totally different posture. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
so for someone say okay, someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I'm challenged and I want to dismiss it, but like I'm hearing this dare, if you will, to grow introspective and do something with how do they do that?
Just like sit with it, honestly. Like there's not, I don't know.
You're like, I don't know, I'm not a therapist. Go talk to your therapist.
Um, like for me, I'm just like, okay, like, in what way is this like, I don't know. Like if someone says something, so for example, I feel um like let's take the coat of many colors for example, right? Because there is a theological interpretation that the coat of many colors is something akin to a princess dress, right? Katone Passim, also how the virgin daughters of the king were clothed. Tamar, Princess Tamar, daughter of King David, etc., also wore the Katona Passim, in a nutshell. And so people are very often challenged by that interpretation that Joseph in Genesis, by wearing the coat of many colors, was wearing something like a princess dress and is therefore gender nonconforming. That's very challenging for people because we're sort of taught that like queer people aren't in the Bible. And in some ways that like is true because like those labels like didn't exist then. Like, queer, gay, lesbian, trans, like those were not words in the vocabulary, right? And we also know very little about sexuality and I would probably say gender too. I think we can probably glean more from gender just based on what's written. Um, but that's not to say that queer people didn't exist, right? Because queer theory will tell us that queer people have always existed. Um, and so what does that sort of like look like from a biblical approach, right? Is to say, I think it's helpful to say that Joseph was gender nonconforming. I probably wouldn't say that Joseph was trans just because I feel like, I don't know, that's like a little bit too specific for me, you know? But if you say it, I will support you. And so, uh, you know, if you're challenged by that, how like just sit with that and ask yourself, okay, in what way is this true? You know? Or like what am I missing here? Or like what is it about this that I don't like? Really like be specific and like take the time to like think about it for yourself. And at the end of the day, like you don't have to agree. You don't. Like, that's totally fine. You don't have to agree with everything that everyone says, but you should respect it at least, I
Yeah.
think. You know? Um, and queer theology is quite challenging, right? Just like in general. Queer people talking about God, doing like God stuff or whatever you want to call it. But
Hashtag
uh
God stuff. Yeah.
hashtag God stuff,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because like, we have been told for so long that our understanding of ourselves is wrong. And so
Mm-hmm.
how could we possibly know God? And we do. And
Yeah.
so let us share that. Let us share that. And there's this really great theology, I think by Justin Tanis, who says, oh, is that his name? Anyway,
Well, we'll
there's
correct it in the description if it's,
yes,
yeah.
yes, please. Um, this theology that says when you get to know each other, you get to know what God is like because we're all created in the image of God. And part
Mm,
is getting to know the LGBTQI plus community and getting to know what we think about God. And so we don't all think the same things, but like have the wherewithal to listen, have the wherewithal to find out, because queer people of faith have always existed. I think that's another thing that people struggle with is like, oh, like you can't, I don't even know. I'm just like going off here. And when I like stop to think, I'm just like, wait, what am I saying?
no, go off. It's great.
But I'm
Yeah.
sort of like, I don't even know what I was saying. What was I saying?
Queer people of faith have always existed and will.
Yes.
Yeah.
Queer people of faith have always existed, And so when we talk about, oh, like you're trying to queer Christianity or like this and
Mm,
that and the other thing, well, Christianity has always been queer. So let's just put that right out in the open. Queer people have always
yeah.
belonged to the church,
Mm,
and for now we will.
yeah. Yeah. And also, like, going back to what you were saying about, like, why is this challenging me? What is true about it? I wonder if, like, part of the resistance people are feeling or the discomfort is a sense of grief for their inner child, teenager, younger self, or current self that wasn't given the permission to exist the way they wanted to or to express their gender or sexuality the way they wanted to. Like if little me would have known that that it's okay and good to like all kinds of people, that like you're allowed to have crushes on girls and boys, and there's such a thing as being non-binary or trans, like that would have given me, not that I was told like it's bad, but even just given that permission. Like if I would have had you as a role model, to say like this is who you are allowed to be, my life would have been totally different.
Mm,
um and so like maybe interrogating like, is this grief that is popping up? It
mm,
feels like
mm,
challenge or disagreement or something, but is this grief for what could have been? um
mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be for sure. Because it's not just queer folks that are restricted by gender norms, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So what advice would you have for someone who wants to get into drag, um and or is trying to reconcile drag and with their faith?
So whenever anyone asks me like, how do I reconcile this, like my queerness with my faith or like drag with my faith, like you don't have to reconcile anything,
Hmm.
you know, like, and I already did it for you, so like if you want to, go ahead. No, but seriously, like this idea that like I have to figure out like how I can exist in a space, or that like queer people have to figure out like how we can exist in a space and in a specific faith tradition is so annoying. And like no one, or well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say no one, but like that's generally not asked of straight people, right?
Mm.
Like, oh, how do you like? Are you just gonna? How do you reconcile your heterosexuality with your Christianity? You know?
That's true. Yeah, I didn't think about it because like it's already in alignment. Like there is
Mm-hmm.
no reconciling that needs to take place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like, I mean, I could give the spiel of, when I was 14 years old, I was researching Leviticus because I was,
Mm.
because a lot of people did, because a lot of people were told that they were an abomination. And they, as teenagers, went on the internet or went to the library and tried to figure it out for themselves. And what an isolating journey that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I'm not called to reconcile. You know, if you want to reconcile, that's great. Um, reconciling is not something that you have to do, I don't think. Like, and I may be going a little bit too off the deep end here, but
Go ahead.
reconciling is this like straight person ask of like, okay, well, how do you validate yourself? And what what? You know?
Yeah.
Like, I just am. Like,
Mm.
you know, it was what did Trixie Mattel say? This is like an I don't know if Trixie Mattel is an atheist. I kind of think she is. But someone asked Trixie Mattel in an interview something that was like, um, you know, what do you say to like all those like religious people out there that like you shouldn't do drag and like this and that and the other thing because they say it's like wrong in the eyes of God. And Trixie just like without stopping was like, well, God's not real and I am.
Yup.
And so like I mean, I believe in God, you know. I'm not an atheist. But hearing that, I was just like, oh my God, because it points to like the realities that people are living in, right?
Yeah.
And just this like fantasy land that, you know, that is like projected onto queer people in this way of like, oh, you have to like do all of these things in order to like figure yourself out so that you can exist in this heterosexual space and this heterosexual society. And like I'm just done. You know, I belonged to a non-open and affirming church for 29 years of my life. I'm done reconciling. I'm done reconciling. I don't want to put up with that shit anymore. If I can't show up as myself, that's your problem.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, unless you're paying me, then you know we'll have a conversation. You know, like it's just
Yes.
it's like annoying. It's annoying to me. And because I was like, that's the other part, like as a pastor, you know, like I do have to minister to the flock, and I do. And I think conversations are important. That being said, if I'm coming to preach at your church and you're paying me a nice fee, I'm not there to explain why I'm there or why it's important that I'm there. I'll say a little bit in the beginning, sure, but I'm not going to go on the whole journey and the whole diatribe of, well, I studied Leviticus and I studied Romans and I studied the one about arsenokatoi and all of this and that and the other thing. And, you know, Jesus says love that and this and that and the other. And I'm so not here for it. And, and part of that reason is just because like liberation of queer and trans people is not located to, you know, analyzing and uncovering these 6 verses in the Bible. You know, there is a whole wealth of queer theology. There is a, you know, so many queer and trans lives to be lived to get to know God. And if we're so focused on like, okay, like figuring out how to just exist, like we're missing out on living. We're missing out on living out our spirituality and our pride. And I'm just so not here for it. Like, I know it was your question. I'm not like coming for you or anything. I'm just like, this is like, you know, and I tried to do it. I tried to do it for so long. I tried to reconcile and I tried to help other people to reconcile. And it didn't work. It didn't work. And so for me, and so this is building upon the knowledge and the philosophy of people who are leading in transformative justice, right? If I don't believe in your transformative capacity, that's on me. And I understand that. And so for me to, I once believed in my former church's capacity to transform themselves. I don't believe in it anymore. And so it's just not for me. It's not for me to see or to understand or to work towards transforming a community to make it inclusive and accepting and a place where everyone can belong. But maybe someone else will. Right? So that's the other piece of transformative justice, is if I don't understand a community's or an individual's capacity to transform and to stop perpetuating cycles of harm, then that's my limitation. Someone else might know a homophobe and they might think, you know what, you're an asshole, but I know you can do better. And for me, I worked a long time. I was the chair of the open and affirming committee. I was leading the church through the discussion to becoming an open and affirming church. And it was sabotaged. It was, essentially, I won't get into like the nitty gritty of what happened. And I don't even want to go there, but I tried. I really tried. And it's just, I also think one of the problems is that like the denomination asks so much of its volunteers and its members that me, as at the time a 20-something-year-old queer person, was leading this process in this institution that had been harming me for all of these years. That's set up for failure, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Set up for failure. And so I also think that, the denomination needs to do better, and I think it is doing better. There's a new director of the Open and Affirming Coalition who I think is going to make a lot of really good changes. But yeah, reconciling, it's not for me. It's not for me. And if someone wants to have that conversation and they're part of my congregation, we can have that conversation. But as far as like everybody else, I'm living my life. I'm living my fantasy, okay? I wanted to do drag for so long. I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race when season 3 was airing. And I was like, is Raja gonna win? Of course she's gonna win. I didn't start doing drag until season 12. I had waited all of those years because I told myself that, I couldn't do it, or if I did drag, that I would never find a romantic partner, and like all of this, that, and the other thing, like, oh, like who would ever want to date a drag queen, and like this and that and the other thing. Well, I'm single and living my life and my fantasy. So, but anyway, sometimes you just got to take that risk. You got to take that leap of faith. And if it's not a leap of faith, there is a difference. This is so silly, but if you can't take a leap of faith, take a leap with faith because it's that much easier.
There you go.
Yeah. Just throw a little faith in there. It's a jump. It's a risk. Throw some faith in it. It doesn't have to be all about faith. I know that's like so silly, but I think it's a small thing that can help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay,
I hear you begging us to move out of the shallows of like, can I please not do the work of affirming my own humanity? My spiritual director, she likes the mantra, I am who I am, who I am, who I am. You are who you are, who you are, who you are. Because you are, yeah, I am who I am, you are who you are. And you should not have to continue doing that labor of defending your own humanity, personhood, self-expression, etc. And so I hear you begging us to like, can we please move deeper? And yeah, we don't need to do this reconciling work, or at least like you were saying, it's like, it's not my work, it's someone else's work. And I see you living that out in drag church of like, let's, I don't need to defend myself. Here I am in celebration. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah. And I am pained by what you had to go through to get there.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I started this podcast, was because of the damage that the church has done, is doing, even in progressive spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you say you're progressive doesn't give you a get out of jail free card. That's not quite what I wanted to say, but it doesn't mean you're gonna get it all right.
Yeah, I get you. Some other girls might not get you, but I get you.
I love You've said that multiple times, which makes me start to question if I actually do make sense. Yeah. Okay, so we'll ignore the second part of that question because you went there. But do you have any advice for people who want to get into drag? Is that, or do you just not want to answer that question?
No, let's just do it.
Oh, just do it. Just get into drag. Is that what you're saying?
I'm getting so worked up over here. Gotta get my fan on a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. Cool off. Yeah.
No, I think the thing that held me back from doing drag and just going into it and taking that risk was feeling like I had to do it well, because there's this this norm of ridiculing the busted queen. And I was like, I never want to look busted. I never want to but looking busted is kind of part of it. You know, you kind of have to figure out what you're doing and what you're good at. So for me, I feel one of my strengths is makeup. I mean, maybe other people don't think that, but I think I look pretty good, you know? Oh God.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm really bad at is styling wigs. And so I buy from wig designers, you know? You can learn all the tricks in the trade and the tricks of the trade, right? But you don't have to have it all figured out. You know, you could just get into it, and you don't have to have the entire skill set of a drag queen or a drag artist, because drag is, you know, it's the makeup, it's the outfit, it's the dancing, the lip syncing, it's all, there's so much to drag. And, you know, there's no school for girls, you know, or well, I think there is one now in San Francisco. I saw something about that, which is amazing, right? And also, so many of us are just figuring this out for ourselves. You know, I'm just sitting, you know, right here watching YouTube videos of how do I do my makeup? What am I doing? How do I sew? Where do I get hip pads? You know, how do I make hip pads?
Yeah.
And so if you want to do it, start small. I would recommend, and you don't have to, you can get someone else to do your makeup for you, but it's going to be hard if you want to really get into drag. You should probably learn how to do it. That's really one of those things that's hard to pay someone else to do your makeup each time. So start there, you know, and be an Instagram drag queen, you know, or an Instagram drag artist. You could just go from here up. You know, you can pull a RuPaul and wear sweatpants and, you know, a wig.
Amazing.
Did you hear about that?
What?
That RuPaul. So there's this I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but I have heard this rumor that RuPaul wears sweatpants when she's sitting at the judging table, that her outfits split in half from the waist down, and she's wearing sweatpants behind there.
You do what you gotta do to be comfortable, I guess.
You do what you gotta do, and you know, you could start there, you know?
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, I do have my clergy dress on right now, but if I didn't have this dress on, I would just have a top on, and I would be wearing gym shorts, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw this thing online that was it is so offensive that we have to be bad at something before we can be good at something. Why does that have to be the case? And I feel that so strongly. I do not like doing things that I'm not good at, unless it's the good kind of bad, on the podcast. But yeah, just I like that just try and just start small. And yeah, do you have any final thoughts? Did we touch on everything? Any final words?
I feel like I've said a lot. I feel like I really let my buried parts roam free on this episode.
In a good way? Or
in a good way. in
Okay.
absolutely good way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I'm just a regular person and I'm doing this thing that I love that brings joy to myself and many others, you
Mm.
know? And like we could say like all of these things about like drag does this, drag does that, drag heals, drag, da 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 da. But like let's not try to justify like just having a good time either.
Yeah, a call to play and celebrate and yeah. So you're
hmm
basically saying it doesn't have to be that serious. Is that what you're saying?
No, and well, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
because when I show up to preach, I have been doing this thing where I'm like, I have to have the most exegetically profound thing to say. And you know what? No, I don't. No, I absolutely do not. Because I'm coming from this place of like, I need to justify myself. I need to
Mm.
prove my worth. And I don't. I don't have to do that. And I credit that to CC DeWolf, who was my communicating live professor in seminary,
Mm.
uh, who said that the most powerful thing that you could do is to show up as yourself,
Mm.
and so don't think that you need to bring all of these things with you, um, because you are enough just as you are.
Mm.
So I will give a good sermon. I love a good sermon. I typically, if I go to a church for the first time, I will preach a sermon on the coat of many colors,
Mm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's a good entry point for people, because it's a story that everyone knows, well, mostly everyone, and it's also fun to say that the coat of many colors is the most prime example of biblical drag, because it is, right? It
Because it
absolutely.
is. I love it.
Second only to the woman Babylon.
To the what? To
Oh,
the
the woman Babylon in Revelation 17 to 19.
Oh, I need to learn about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you have me back on the podcast, we can talk all about Revelation. I wrote my thesis on Revelation.
Oh, let's do it. That'd be great. Um, yeah, that has been one of my sayings, right before, especially when I do a new thing or a hard thing, is you have nothing to prove. There's nothing to prove, Just
Yeah.
I love that call of just show up and that's all you can do.
hmm
Show up and have a good time and be in your fabulousness.
Show up, have a good time. Church doesn't have to be so complicated. It could be fun. It could be extravagant. And just be yourself. Just be comfortable with who you are, who God created you to be. And like, yeah, just like live into it. And don't feel like you gotta have everything figured out, because you don't, you know?
Well, it is tradition on Called to Be Bad to end with a blessing. So, Marge, would it be okay if I bless you and all of our baddies out there listening and watching?
Absolutely.
Great. Marge and all of you beautiful baddies, may you go from this episode ready to dig up all that has. Oh, what was our word? All. What was the dig up, the unbury?
The buried parts?
You looked at me so you were judging hard. You're like, this is your blessing.
I mean, I'm just realizing as like, because as I said, like I'm demisexual. So like one of the ways that I realize that I'm demisexual is that like I miss sexual innuendos like all the time. Like I'm just like it just goes over my wig. And your buried parts. I mean, that totally sounds sexual, doesn't it?
Think about that. Unleash, unearth, undig your buried parts, free them into the world. Let it go, let it all out. I'm just gonna let it go like that. That's fine. People will take it as they will. Amen. Preach. Here we are.
Here we are.
Well, thank you so much, Marge, for coming on. This was, a delight and a privilege, and I appreciate you telling your story and, everything.
Absolutely. I appreciate you too. Thank you so much for having me. Can I tell people where to find me?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot. That was, please.
Okay. So I'm Marge Erin Johnson. There are lots of ways to find me. I'm most active on Instagram at theology.queen. If you follow me, I will only follow you back if you send me a message. If you don't send me a message, I will not follow you back. But I am committed to like getting to know the people that follow me. That's important. Okay. That's a pastor's thing, you know? But anyway, you can also find me. I have my website, theologyqueen.com. If you want to invite me to your church, your community, to anything like that, reach out on my website. There's a contact form. I also do keynote speaking, sermons. I also do drag story hour, drag bingo. So, maybe you're not ready for a drag church, but hey, even though we kind of dragged like the peripheral thing, having queerness in your church and like the side, that's a good way to start. It's a good way to start. So be in touch, okay? And anything else? I'm also starting a Patreon. So if you're interested in a Patreon, I will be making content on queer theology deep dives. So if you want to know more about things like Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors, Kotona Passim, that will be there. I'm also going to be doing devotionals and just dismantling toxic theology in general. If you also want to do like deconstruction work, like I'm probably also going to do like the videos on like Leviticus and like Romans. I'll be doing those as well, just over a period of time. Because hey, I mean, there is value in that, but don't limit yourself to that either, right? And what else? I'm also on TikTok, but I'm a consumer of TikTok. So if you want to follow me and send me TikToks, I'll watch them.
Oh, I need to do that. Yeah, because I'm also just a stalker on TikTok. But yeah, great. I love how you were like, I am just not gonna do this reconciling work anymore. And then you're like, but if you pay me on Patreon, then I will tell you about Leviticus.
Yes. Well, I think so much of it is just like the emotional labor of it. Like I cannot.
Absolutely.
Like, how many times do I gotta talk about Leviticus? I mean,
right.
Jesus Christ.
And you deserve to be compensated for that labor. So absolutely. Yeah. Get that money on Patreon. I love that. I would love to hear those queer theology deep dives and have you back on to talk about Revelation, because that would be great. We haven't done an episode on Revelation. So anyways, that's all for this episode of Called to Be Bad. Keep being your bad, beautiful selves, and I will see you next time.